Introduced in 1990, Norplant was the first long-acting hormonal contraceptive offered in the United States. Norplant consists of 6 flexible silicone rods, each releasing 36 milligrams of levonorgestrel, a synthetic form of the naturally produced hormone progesterone. The 6 rods are surgically implanted into a woman's arm, 8 to 10 centimeters from the crease of the elbow, and over the course of 5 years, it releases a total of 216 milligrams. This video will explore the history of Norplant, starting with a background on some of the previously offered birth control methods, Norplant's introduction in 1990, and its removal from U.S. markets in 2000. This history will specifically include the way in which Norplant was used to increase reproductive freedom, or as a coercive tool for population control. Overall, the intent of this video is to use Norplant as a case study for how women have had to alter their bodies in order to gain a sense of reproductive freedom, and how certain women have been coerced into changing their bodies. Gaining awareness of the history of Norplant helps us be more able to recognize the positive aspects of birth control today and be aware of potentially coercive methods of use. Alright, so we will begin with a brief history of the pill and the Dalkon shield, because these were 2 methods of contraception which set the stage for the introduction of Norplant. The story begins with Margaret Sanger, a women's reproductive rights activist and founder of the birth control movement. Her motivation to create a contraceptive pill stemmed from the belief that overpopulation and lack of reproductive choice were large contributors to poverty around the world. By the late 1950s, researchers hired by Sanger had developed a synthetic pill which proved to suppress ovulation, and they began testing the product in Puerto Rico. While testing and approval of the FDA was not required at this point, the researchers anticipated that people would doubt American women's ability to remember to take the pill daily. By testing in Puerto Rico, they hoped to demonstrate that Puerto Rican women had the capacity to follow this regimen, therefore proving that any woman in the United States could as well. The Puerto Rican press released articles claiming the testing to be racist and imperialist for using people of color as test subjects for Americans. This is important to note because this mistrust in women persisted as a concern for many population controllers. The head researcher described Puerto Rico as a prototype underdeveloped country on America's own doorstep. Women in Puerto Rico were initially eager to try the pill, but most did not maintain its usage because it contained 3 times more estrogen and 100 times more progestin than birth control methods today, therefore causing a large host of side effects. After adjustments were made, the pill was introduced as the first hormonal oral contraceptive in the United States in 1960. In 1971, the Dalkon shield was introduced as the first intrauterine device in the United States. The motivation for the Dalkon shield stemmed from a desire to increase reproductive choice for women, but also grew out of a concern that women of lower income and education attainment would forget to take the pill. Population controllers therefore believed it would be advantageous to develop a longer-term form of contraception. The Dalkon shield was quite popular, however, it had not undergone adequate testing and ultimately became responsible for tens of thousands of gynecological complications and at least 18 deaths. Public criticism of the negative physiological impacts on women led the U.S. Congress to pass federal legislation in 1976 mandating safety and efficacy testing, as well as the approval of the FDA before any hormonal birth control could be authorized for sale. Hundreds of thousands of lawsuits led to the eventual bankruptcy and removal from the market in 1985. The Dalkon shield was a turning point for the reproductive rights movement because the pharmaceutical industry was subject to more scrutiny for overlooking inadequate testing for the sake of financial gain, and legislators were criticized for treating birth control as a technological fix to larger systemic problems such as poverty and overpopulation. The next biggest innovation in birth control was Norplant, the first long-acting hormonal contraceptive method. Approved by the FDA in 1990, it intended to combine the positive aspects of the pill with the long-term effects of the IUD. Companies advertised it as being the most effective method on the market, protecting against 99.96% of potential pregnancies. In 1990, Norplant was seen as a historical breakthrough. The National Women's Health Network published an article claiming, "A new method which has been well researched and is clearly very effective, such as Norplant, may fill the needs of at least certain segments of the population." And in theory, it did have the potential to offer women an increase in options. A high school in Baltimore offered it to teens as a way to help them plan. A 16-year-old mother attending the high school says, "I wanted Norplant to help me finish school. Now I am planning to go to college." However, some politicians and legislators also saw it as an opportunity for population control. A very overt connection between population control, class, and race was made when the Philadelphia Inquirer published an article with the headline, "Poverty in Norplant: Can Contraception Reduce the Underclass?" In the column, it placed two stories from the day before alongside each other for analysis. These were the FDA approval of Norplant and research showing that almost half African American children in America live in poverty. The writer used these statements to allude to the recommendation that Norplant should be incentivized to the black population in order to reduce the underclass. They claimed that the main reason more black children are living in poverty is that the people having the most children are the ones least capable of supporting them, and describing people as being born into a dysfunctional family. The writer addresses that this might raise the specter of eugenics, but believed it to be worse to ignore this supposed solution to breaking the cycle of inner-city poverty. It attempts to frame this incentivization as something that could help low-income mothers on welfare by reducing procreation and allocating additional welfare money. However, the nature of the suggestion is inherently coercive, basically saying, if you want welfare benefits, you must be sterilized. The article did receive pushback from a lot of reporters and the public, and the Inquirer did release an apology. But regardless, the publication established a connection between Norplant and population control over those deemed unfit to be mothers. Between 1991 and 1992, state legislators pushed for the passing of 20 bills related to Norplant. Although none of them passed, the attempts are representative of the ways in which legislators desired to use the contraceptive. These bills included providing financial incentive directed at poor women to use the implant, mandating insertion for women who birth babies with fetal alcohol syndrome, and requiring Norplant for women in prison or on probation. Some women did have to face coercion. One woman convicted of child abuse was ordered to use Norplant for 3 years as a condition of her probation. Another 27-year-old woman was convicted for beating 2 of her children and was offered a reduced sentence if she agreed to have Norplant inserted. This coercion also received pushback. Many women considered these attempts at coercion to be a form of genocide and eugenics. These examples show how some judges and legislators deemed convicted, incarcerated, or formerly incarcerated women, women of lower socioeconomic status, and women of color as less fit for reproduction. However, it was not the immoral use and intentions that ultimately led to Norplant being taken off the market in the year 2000. In 1993, women started to complain of side effects that were not listed or made known to them, as well as report trouble removing the device. Between 1991 and 1993, the FDA received 38 reports of women who had to be hospitalized due to infections at the insertion site. While 38 does not seem like a lot, the FDA Commissioner David Kessler estimated that only 1% of all serious drug interactions had been reported to the FDA. Some women developed more serious side effects such as pelvic inflammatory disease, which can lead to infertility, chronic pelvic pain, and ectopic pregnancies. An ectopic pregnancy is when a fetus develops outside of the uterus and may require the removal of the uterus or even cause death. Other more serious side effects included stroke and blindness. However, the life-altering or life-threatening conditions were largely dismissed in the medical and legal fields as being attributed to factors unrelated to Norplant. By 1995, 400 women in the U.S. had filed lawsuits against the maker of Norplant, claiming that it was difficult to remove. Women cited a lack of access to trained medical professionals, being discouraged from removing it, complications during removal, or permanent damage. The removal usually took less than 30 minutes with local anesthesia. However, some women had to be placed under general anesthesia for multiple hours. Conversations shifted to whether or not lawyers would kill off Norplant. By 1999, the manufacturer of Norplant paid out 36,000 settlements, amounting to more than $54 million. In 2000, the distribution of Norplant was suspended, and in 2002, Wyeth Pharmaceuticals officially decided to withdraw the product from the U.S. market. Overall, Norplant did increase the variety of contraceptive choices and catalyze the creation of many other forms of long-lasting hormonal birth control. The problem was that some people saw Norplant as an opportunity to oppress segments of the population that they deemed unfit for motherhood under the guise of overpopulation. The colonial logic that women of color and lower income were not responsible enough to maintain the daily regimen of the pill served as a justification for imposing control over their bodies. The hormonal implant methods that are available today, such as Nexplanon, are descendants of Norplant with similar functionality. Ultimately, birth control has the potential to increase reproductive freedom or restrict women. So understanding the history of coercion in birth control should help us be aware and critical of practices today.